This is episode 20 of the SOC Level 2 pathway of TryHackMe, and in this episode we are going to begin the threat hunting module, and of course it's going to be the introduction to threat hunting. Our goal for today is to understand threat hunting as it relates to incident response, the overall threat hunting mindset, and any specific goals that it achieves or strives to achieve. The objectives are to understand what it actually is, discuss the roles that it plays in helping secure the organization, in contrast to incident response, and we're going to explore different hunting goals and discuss how they develop the organization's security posture. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand what the baseline idea and what to look for, how to look for these things, and when to decide to move on from your investigation. We're also going to look at the intelligence-driven approach to threat hunting, and among others, if it's not the best way to move forward. So the prerequisites for this are the tactical detection room, preparation room for incident response, introduction to cyber threat intelligence for SOC, Open CTI, MISP, and MITRE. And for the most part, I do believe that I have done videos on all of these pieces, so except the preparation phase of incident response. Let's see what else. The intro to cyber threat intelligence for sure, threat intelligence for SOC for sure, Open CTI and MISP. All of these things I have done videos for. So if you have not seen them or if you don't exactly know what they are, feel free to go search through the channel and you'll be able to find that information. So that being said, let's actually dive into the core concept of threat hunting. Okay, threat hunting is the approach to finding cybersecurity threats where there's an active effort to look for signs of malicious activity. In the most basic form, that's the definition. However, in order for us to really understand what's going on and exactly what the actual role is in the organization, we have to compare it to incident response. So as you can imagine, threat hunting, just by the phrase, by the way that it's named, it seems offensive. It seems like an active approach to the concept versus incident response is a responsive approach. It's a reactive approach. And it literally says it in the very first line. Incident response is innately reactive. The action or response is triggered by anything that happens, like an alert or something that's going on, and then you got to try to investigate and triage and analyze and do whatever you can to try to figure out what just happened. And we can talk about this in the incident response videos. There are multiple incident response videos, maybe not the preparation video itself, but there are multiple incident response videos on the channel. Threat hunting is proactive, as the name implies. So there is no actual trigger. It's more so you are going after potential threats that could occur in the organization, and that guides what your security posture might be. And so this is where pen testing comes into play. This is where ethical hacking comes into play. And the contrast is really pretty much displayed here. So reactive is all of these things that go on inside of incident response. Proactive is what happens over here. And you're actively searching for the suspicious events that become incidents. You're guided by threat intelligence, and there might be a threat that we don't know yet, so we got to keep hunting for it. In incident response, there's a threat that needs to be dealt with right now. So you are fully aware of the threat in incident response. In threat hunting, you're literally looking for, trying to find different various threats that might possibly exist. Threat hunting is usually done when there's already an established incident response process, as well as detection stuff in place, but there might be a gap and they think that the incidents aren't being detected early enough. So if there are advanced threats happening or zero-day threats happening, there needs to be a really good potential security posture that's in place. And even a well-made red team exercise, which is all offensive security and pen testing, any of those things will always exist, and it will show ways that you can go through the organization undetected. So threat hunting bridges that gap, and it's always looking for ways to add and improve the current detection mechanisms so that anything in the future that could be bad behavior will automatically be detected immediately, so that the detected threats go to the incident response team immediately, and the trigger for mobilizing those threats are findings from the actual hunt and anything else after the fact, and it can lead the team to further find bad behavior. So it's a cycle, it's a cyclical process, as you can probably imagine. So this is the threat intelligence creation, it's fed by incident response, and it goes into the threat hunt, and then there's continuous monitoring that feeds the incident response process, and detection via hunting also feeds the incident response process. So it's this multiple feeds going into the incident response process that will create more threat intelligence that again enables the better threat hunting to take place, and so on and so forth. So it's a very big cyclical approach. As you probably have already noticed with everything in cybersecurity, it never stops. It's always running, and there's always more detection and monitoring happening that feeds more intelligence into the system, and that makes the system stronger. So updated intelligence is a big key about this whole thing, and you can find updated intelligence from MITRE or from the MISP or these variety of different organizations that their entire job is to update threat intelligence as threat happens. And you can either gather your intel from there, or you can gather your intel from your own incident response team and your own security teams that have been in the game long enough that they kind of know what happens within your company, and they have a lot of updated information as well. So in a perfect world, your team would also update those open source databases so that everybody in the world has access to the most recent attacks that are taking place, so that security engineers and security analysts from all over the world feed into the intelligence cycle, and they help your company as well as their own companies get better at responding to threats and detecting threats. So our first few questions here are, what do you call the approach to finding cybersecurity threats where there's an active effort done to look for signs of malicious activity? And that would be threat hunting. Then we have, what are we contrasting threat hunting with? And that would be incident response. It's reactive. Incident response is innately reactive. What is done first thing when an initial notification or alert is received? I believe that's triage. I see. So it's triaged. So it's the past tense. It is triaged. Threat hunting is innately proactive. What is it guided by? And that would be threat intelligence. And threat hunting and incident response are two different approaches that aim to ensure one specific goal is met. It is to strengthen the organization's security posture. And just like that, we have our first set of answers. So let's move on to our next piece right here, which is the threat hunting mindset. Just like everything else in cybersecurity, your mindset when it comes down to threat hunting is pretty much everything. You can have all of the best cutting edge equipment and software and technology in the world, but if your people are weak, then your infrastructure is innately going to be weak. People are the most sensitive link in the chain when it comes down to security in general. So it applies to every part of security, and that is literally the same thing for the hunt itself. So the basis for a hunt leads compromised of accurate pieces of information, such as known relevant malware and trusted threat intelligence. Through those leads, we give threat hunters better chances of achieving amazing things, from easy wins like finding malicious binaries to more complex hunting like finding patterns of activity of certain groups that target the organization similar to yours or the industry that you're in. Threat intelligence, as the name implies, is intelligence about threats, and it's fed from a variety of different sources, including your own company as well. So understanding what you're going to be dealing with is akin to knowing how they might behave within the environment, possibly allowing us to narrow down the search to specific sweet spots, such as specific pieces of data, or even knowing which groups or advanced persistent threats might be particularly interested in targeting you. Then there's unique threat intelligence that is developed internally, and it's very valuable because it applies to your company directly. It applies to your infrastructure directly. So not a lot of organizations have that kind of intrusion experience that would allow them to study and develop usable intelligence, and even fewer have the capability of developing it internally. So intelligence of this kind may have the characteristic of being ultimately unique to your organization. IOCs are very, very big, and we did a good analysis and deep dive on IOCs when we were creating Sigma rules in a few videos prior to this particular video. So go check those out. IOCs are indicators of compromise that essentially are indicators that compromise has taken place. The name is very descriptive of what it actually is. And if they are documented on previous intrusions, they would be the most obvious and straightforward example for this. So they immediately give value not only to your threat hunters, but also to the detection mechanism, because they're the actual traces of the adversary. It's the actual footprint of what just happened. And the reintrusions of that specific adversary should be easier to spot if you know what the IOCs are, and you can create Sigma rules and a variety of different applications or software or just threat detection mechanisms to make those things easier to spot. So you also have threat intelligence feeds, because most companies aren't able to create their own stuff internally, so they rely on external feeds. And not everybody obviously has that experience to create those things. So to be able to get the IOCs of your adversaries from different companies is very, very valuable, which is why MITRE is a big deal and MISP is a big deal, and really any NIST, and there's so many different organizations, ISO, that just help you find these things. Lockheed Martin, there's so many of them. As I think about it, I can probably keep thinking about more. So there's a lot of different threat intelligence producers, as they're called, and you would be a threat intelligence consumer until you are capable enough to produce your own threat intelligence internally and eventually distribute it to the public so that they have access to it as well. So it's very important for you to learn from threat intelligence feeds and from the various producers, and they are both publicly available, and there are some that you can actually purchase because they may be, higher end and they may be more specialized. MISP is a really big one. It's an open source threat intelligence. MITRE is another big one. So those are both open source. And if you are in this world, you should be using them very, very regularly. The paid resources are the Recorded Future, ReliaQuest. Those are just a couple of examples of this. They're not cheap, as you can imagine. Because it would be, it's mainly for like really large companies that have a lot of resources that really need specialized threat intelligence. So it's not going to be cheap to be able to get a membership to those things, and it's not going to apply to most of the people that are watching this video, because just from what I know about our community, most of the people watching this are doing it for themselves and they're trying to begin their career in cybersecurity. So most likely it's not going to be you that's going to do it, but maybe your company might pay for it, depending on how big your company is and how important it is for them to have a good cybersecurity posture. So the general hunting guide could be the unique threat intelligence or threat intelligence feeds. Examples could be the indicators of compromise that would be unique. Intelligence feeds could be Recorded Future, MISP, MITRE, Digital Shadows, etc. So what's the most obvious and straightforward example of a unique threat intelligence? And that would be indicators of compromise. All right. There we go. So let's move on to the threat hunting process. Real quick, before we move on to the next task, I wanted to tell you about the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community, which is going to be the premier membership community for security professionals and hackers. And as a member of this community, you get a lot of perks like Python automations and direct access to me, members only content, downloads, the Discord chat, discount on merch. There's a lot of great stuff that comes as a part of being a member. And of course, it's a very, very exclusive group of people that actually help each other. And the Discord chat is actually very live, and people really do like getting their minds combined on these tasks and, doing bug bounties together and a lot of great stuff. So I'm not going to take too much time out of the video to give this to you, but I definitely do encourage that you go check this out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by what goes on inside of Hackaholics Anonymous, and I would love to see you in our membership chats and in our membership community. All right, let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so what do we hunt for? The answer to this is very important. It basically dictates the direction. It tells you which way you're supposed to go and where your focus is going to be. The discussion about this specific example that we're about to go over, it goes over the overall concept of threat intelligence that's discussed, that we just discussed. But you need to kind of highlight this one as well as anything else that would fall into this specific conversation, because the use cases are very different. And what we're going to go over, obviously, is the introduction, and it doesn't cover everything. So it's just an example. And to be able to get really good at this, because this is a little bit more focused on the offensive security, and I do know that there are a lot of people who are interested in offensive security, red teaming, all that stuff. So to be able to get really good at this, you gotta really make friends with all of these various threat hunting feeds and these different resources, so that you can actually understand more than just, malware and the potential IOCs that we're going to talk about in this video today. So known malware samples are all over the internet, and a lot of them are publicly available and have the published analyses that go alongside them. One example would be to take a closer look at your company, identify the relevant threat actors that might take an interest in you, and then hunt for the traces of the malware that they use in their toolkits within your organization. So you look at your company, you look at the industry that you're in, identify what potential threat actors might be interested in attacking you, and there's more likely a case that has been handled previously, and then you can use the traces from that to try to find what might be interested in attacking you and what the malware would be. So instead of trying to look at general examples, we can actually try to find something specific if we just know what it is about your company or about your case, or I don't know, something that you're thinking about that you would go and try to find for it. A really good repository is the Zoo, where you can play with live malware and gain insights into how they actually work with the published reports that are associated with them, and the Trend Micro Threat Encyclopedia is another really big one. These are just powerful tools. So the Zoo is a GitHub repository, obviously, that just has a lot of stuff in it that you can play with, and go to the malware folder, and inside of the malware folder you have the binaries and you have the source code, and then the threat encyclopedia, is by the Trend Micro website, and you can search through this, or you can click around and try to find things. And again, this is a giant world. Like, cybersecurity is so massive that everything inside of it has subcategories, and you can just get lost down the rabbit hole. So this is specific to, it is technically in the SOC Level 2 pathway, but this falls more under the offensive security approach to cybersecurity. So attack residues are a very interesting concept to think about, because an attack always leaves some kind of residue, which is probably the best word for it, like a breadcrumb. So you know that something happened. To check for those residues is a really big part of threat hunting. So knowing the environment well enough to be able to separate attack residues from normal behavior, which is your baseline, that is a big deal. And just getting your feet wet by going through the various repositories that we talked about and the websites, just so you can understand what the residues might be to keep an eye out for. And then when you work for a company, they teach you what their baselines look like and what would be abnormal or anomalous behavior. A lot of attack residues blend well with the normal noise, and pairing that with a more advanced adversary who knows how to clean up after themselves, which is really bad, or maybe even worse, they know how to employ tactics that are so stealthy from the get-go that you just get lost in trying to find things, and it no longer becomes straightforward. It's not as simple as you think it might be. So it's a good way to cover your bases, to just go through everything that we've discussed so far, but you only need to catch them making a mistake once, because once you do, then you can try to track their behavior and really start putting blocks in place and various infrastructure pieces that would prevent it from happening again. They have to constantly be better in their movements, because if they get caught, they have to change their approach, because their old approach most likely is not going to work anymore, because now there's going to be something inside of our Sigma rules and inside of our threat hunting and our IPS and IDS. All of our stuff is going to be updated, so that they have to constantly change their ways to try to get better. So known vulnerabilities of products and applications are, again, disclosed all over the place, and for every single product and application and version of those products and applications, there's known vulnerabilities that are already distributed online that you can go find. Threat actors are obviously very creative in trying to find those vulnerabilities, and once they do, the known vulnerabilities would be actively hunted for and patched once anybody finds them or catches them. So there's something called the 0 day, which nobody has ever detected before, and it's the first time that people are noticing it. But then everything that is not a 0 day, there's probably something that already exists online that you can try to find information for, and then you update your systems and just get better at detecting these people. So the organization should be extra vigilant for announcements of 0 day vulnerabilities, and that those things could be affecting the assets that you have. You should be running immediate checks on the current version that you're running if it's already vulnerable, and if there are traces of the vulnerability being exploited, as long as the historical data may allow. These hunts are a great way to retroactively check the exploitation of vulnerable assets, while also ensuring that the assets of the organization are all patched up and up to date with the current security standards. So the general hunting guide would be the known relevant malware. Examples are the zoo, threat encyclopedia. Attack residues would be the indicators of the attack, indicators of compromise. Known vulnerabilities would be anything that would be 0 day, which is not really known because it's 0 day. So there has been 0 days that people have been aware of it. That's essentially what that means. Common vulnerabilities and exposures, however, is a really large database of known vulnerabilities, and you can track by, versions of softwares or versions of operating systems, so on and so forth. So this is all general discussion, obviously, so just keep that portion in mind. So how do we hunt for these things? The reviewing of the information factors and a lot of other elements for the consideration will lead you to understand the target of your hunt. And now that you know what you're hunting for, the next question is, how do you hunt for it? And we're not going to touch on actual hunting theories because we're going to be doing a lot of exercises as we go through this. But we will focus on the driving force that the theories and techniques are based on. So attack signatures and indicators of compromise are two big things. So upon identifying the subject of the hunt, it's imperative that we ensure that we characterize them into specific and actionable identifiers by which we will immediately recognize. This is done most effectively via attack signatures and IOCs. Sorry about the dog barking in the background. By condensing the what's of the hunt down to attack signatures and IOCs, we suddenly have a set of information that we can immediately compare to the available historical data, and it makes it easier to find objects of interest like relevant malware, attack residues, and even exploitation of vulnerabilities. You do need to know the environment, right? And you do need to know the baselines and the behaviors inside of your environment, and obviously what the logs would look like when something has been exploited. So what the logs would look like normally versus what the logs would look like when something's been exploited. There are logical queries, and hunting can be done via logical queries, which essentially means characterizing vulnerable assets through specified actionable identifiers like the application version will allow you to craft queries that filter for these identifiers. So SQL queries are a version of a query. So a search query that you put into Google is another version of a query. So when you know what you're looking for, you can create specific queries that will search for the identifiers of these IOCs or the indicators of attack. So it gives you low-hanging fruits for easy picking, and it makes the organization's security posture much stronger as a result. The patterns of the activity are a really big one. So the MITRE attack matrix is one of these things that goes into the pattern of the activity. And this is what the MITRE attack matrix look like. So they're not specific attacks, right? These are patterns of attack. So for example, if we just went to execution, and if you pay attention to it, a lot of these things match with what goes on in the attack framework that's developed by Lockheed Martin. And if we just click on privilege escalation, for example, it'll bring us all the various techniques under privilege escalation. And if we click on one of these techniques, it'll bring us all of the various names of the procedures and the IDs associated with them and the names of the companies, or not even companies, the advanced persistent threat groups, the APT groups that have done this. So like Bad Rabbit, for example, is a group that has done this. and then you have a specific malware that's been developed, so ransomware especially, that's been developed to affect the Ukrainian transportation sector in 2017. And then you have the techniques that were used to actually run this thing, and then drive-by compromise is another one. And so the more you click on this, the deeper it goes and the more information is revealed by it, and the various mitigations that you can take and the various detections that you can take. So this specific threat framework right here, this map that you see right here, the matrix, is not specific to the technique. This is the activity and the overall patterns that these people take to run their attacks. And then once you understand their patterns, you can detect their tactics and techniques and procedures much easier. All right, so here are our questions. So we have malwares are constantly being used in the toolkits of threat actors. What is the live malware repository that we touched upon above? That would be the zoo. Very good. Knowing what is normal in your environment and separating them from what's not is a skill that all threat hunters should have. What examples of threat intelligence blends well with environmental noise? That would be attack residues, I believe. Okay, excellent. And then we have threat actors are quite creative in finding vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. What should the organization be extra vigilant in monitoring for announcements of? I want to say that's 0-day vulnerabilities. Okay, great. So characterization of the subject of the hunt into specific and actionable identifiers and imperative for the hunt's success. How is it done most effectively? That would be attack signatures and IOCs. Yeah, okay, cool. Very good. All right, making progress. And let's see. Moving on to the next one, which is a practical application. All right, we are going to use the MITRE Attack Navigator, which I think is this thing, right? Let me see. No, it's not. It's actually a different piece of the MITRE framework. I love this place, honestly. The Attack Navigator is a tool designed to make it easier to visualize your defensive coverage, your red-blue team planning, and the frequency of detected techniques. It allows you to choose the specific attack techniques, but it also gives you an idea of how the attack flows and how it should be a visually appealing way to detect it, I guess. The Attack Navigator will be used to answer the questions in this task. If you haven't already done so, please click the link, which is what we just did. The landing page looks like this. So let's proceed by create a new layer and go to Enterprise. And it'll take us to the navigation. So there we go. And then Enterprise. There we go. I love this place. I think we did a video on this actually when we were reviewing the MITRE framework. Select the magnifier glass under selection controls and then type WannaCry, which we already did, or we did a video on WannaCry. So WannaCry is actually a very famous attack that has happened. The software part of the results should show one result. Click on the select button beside the result. Yeah, I recognize this a lot. So I'm pretty sure we did this. Okay, so first what we're going to do is we're going to click on selection controls and then type WannaCry. So we're going to go selection controls and then right here, and then we're going to do WannaCry, right? Did I do that right? Oh, it's one word, WannaCry. Okay, there we go. So we got WannaCry, and what are we supposed to do here? Software, WannaCry, select, deselect all. So let's go to software, WannaCry, select all, and there we go. So notice how as soon as we did it and we highlight over it, it updates everything onto the screen, and you can see all the pieces that apply to it, all the various attack patterns that apply to it. So we're going to select it, and I think I've selected it, so that should be fine. It should show something like this. Yes, it does show something like that. So to better visualize the selection, we're going to select the background color under technique controls. It'll immediately fill the selected techniques with the color of the choice, and would also set an arbitrary score of 1 for this layer. So let's see. Let's go to, okay, so there we go. It's right here. So we go under technique controls and we click on the background color, and I just selected red because it's a very, very obvious color. And the next piece is the arbitrary score of 1 for this layer. The control for this beside the background color is still under the technique controls. So the scoring, and we're going to do 1. There we go. That should be good, I think, right? And finally, we can set a name for this layer by editing the layer information, other layer controls. It should look something like this. So, all right, so under layer controls, I just clicked on layer settings and it opened up the piece where I can change the name, and it was originally just layer, and I just changed it to WannaCry. And then when we roll over any of these, we can see that the score has updated, and it just shows the name of the specific technique or the various approach. So now in the same navigator, repeat all the steps for 2 more threats: Stuxnet, which is what happened against Iran's nuclear program, and Configure, which I'm not aware of. You can do this by simply clicking the plus button on top of the page and then repeating the same process. This time set a score of 2 for Stuxnet and 4 for Configure. We'll stitch all these layers together. We'll know exactly which threats employ. And once you've repeated the steps for the above, let's proceed by clicking the plus button and create layer from other layers. Choose Enterprise Attack v14 under domain, Okay, so first I'm going to do the Stuxnet and Configure, and then from there we will do the other piece where we merge all the layers together. So let me go do that real quick. Okay, cool. So I got WannaCry at the top, Stuxnet, and Configure. And now what we're going to do is we're going to merge. So we're going to click on the plus button, create layer from other layers, Enterprise Attack v14, and then put A plus B plus C on the score expression. Let's skip all the other settings and hit create. So let's see, we're going to go here. We're going to do this, create layer from all the other layers. Okay, so after after a lot of trial and error, I found out that you don't want to be on v14. You actually want to be on v15, because on v14 these things don't even show up, and it doesn't give you the create layer button. It doesn't allow any of these things to happen. So v15 is the most recent, and if we looked at this right here, they actually have v13 over here, and they tell us to use v14. But the reality is that you want to be the most recent version of Enterprise, which is v15. After that, there's nothing else that is available for you to choose. And so when you actually do that, it immediately shows, and I'm just going to show you. So I clicked v14, and then you notice that those things went away, and no matter what I put over here, the create layer doesn't present itself. But as soon as I go to v15, those things are available, and you can put your expression there, and then now we can do create layer. And now that we do that, we actually have all of our layers combined, obviously, and we can see everything according to their color coding, and we go over it. It gives you, if it says score of 2, we can say that this is Stuxnet. Score 6 means that it combines a few of them together, so probably Stuxnet and what is it called? The Configure and Stuxnet, for example. This would just be Stuxnet. That would just be Stuxnet. This would be probably Stuxnet combined with WannaCry, so on and so forth. So now that we have all of these things together, now we can go and try to answer the remaining questions. So some notes on the color coding of the combination. The different colors are set to be able to immediately see which common tactics or techniques these threat actors share. A deep red means that it's common to all of them, while the lighter colors means it's either one or any combination of the threat actors. The scores are arbitrary, and you can set them in terms of relevance to your organization or just random if you want to play around with it. Questions would be related to this at the navigator layer. So these tools and resources at hand would allow for a more straightforward approach to identifying patterns of activity. Once we are satisfied with the way that we've characterized the relevant threats that we wanted to focus on, we can then start hunting. This intelligence-driven approach of characterizing threat actor behavior through their TTPs is one, if not the best way to go about hunting. It immediately gives value to the hunt, and it's sensible, straightforward, and actionable. MITRE has done a lot, not only within the cybersecurity sphere, but it also So that's whatever. So when do we decide to move on? The single biggest challenge in threat hunting is knowing when to decide to move on. And when will you know that you're done with it? The capture the flag analogy. So in CTFs, you immediately know before you even start that by the end of it, if you do everything right, there's going to be a flag waiting for you. If you're not able to get the answer, that just means that you need to study more and further improve, so the next time you tackle a similar problem, you'll have more chances of capturing that flag. That's not necessarily the case for threat hunting. It's completely possible and even more probable than not that you do everything right and not find anything. So it'll be normal to feel inadequate. There's always going to be internal doubt when hunting for threats, but as long as you follow your processes, especially within a hunting plan that's intelligence driven, you should be fine. So which tactic has the most techniques highlighted? So let's look at that real quick. So these are our tactics at the top, and we want to see which one has the most techniques highlighted. So let me just, so this one has 3, that one has 2. It seems like discovery by far has the most techniques highlighted. So discovery would be our answer. Then it says, which technique does the 3 threats have in common? So which technique does the 3 threats have in common? I see. Okay, so basically after going through like all of the color codings, what we can see here is that when you scroll over one, if it has a score of 7, it means that all 3 of those techniques are actually over here. So it could either be lateral movement, or it could be exploitation of remote services. That could be it. That's the only thing that I found that actually has a score of 7. Nothing else has a score of 7. We have 6, we have 4, 2, the red is actually 1, etc. So there's nothing that has a score of 7 with the exception of this piece, exploitation of remote services or lateral movement. So let's see. I think it's exploitation of remote services. That's the technique. Perfect. What technique does WannaCry and Configure have in common? So WannaCry and Configure, let's see what they have in common. Okay, so we know from our scoring system that WannaCry was 1 and Configure was 4. And the only thing that has a score of 5 is the inhibit system recovery. So I'm going to say that that is the answer. And it is great. So what's the score of the techniques that Stuxnet, Configure have in common? The score of the techniques that Stuxnet and Configure have in common, that would be 5. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Stuxnet and Configure is 2 and 4, so that would be 6. Okay, there we go. All right, we got it. That is the answer to our practical examination that we just went right here with MITRE. This is actually very useful. I hope you guys actually use it as well. Okay, so let's go over the goals and then we'll wrap this up. So far, we've talked about the threat hunting concept and what you're going to be doing. And now we're going to be talking about the whys. And I usually lead with why, but they kind of took a reverse approach here. The proactive approach to finding the bad. Threats are one of the constants in our world in security. There's never going to be a shortage of malicious actors, from script kiddies that copy everybody else's scripts to well-funded advanced persistent threats. There's always going to be someone snooping around in the environment. And with that in mind, it's imperative that you can find them first and fast, and ideally before they're able to do what they set out to do. So this is fine, I'll do it myself is the first piece that we got here. And then he snaps his fingers and something happens, I guess, and they find him. So discovering the pre-existing bad. So through complex and sophisticated attack chains, chance or maybe even luck, it's reality that some activities of these people may slip through the detection mechanism. And in that sense, similar activities are essentially undetectable, but they're not invisible. And it's that detection mechanisms that haven't been developed to automatically flag those activities. So it's through threat hunting that we were able to find them, and upon such discovery, it'll be consequently and probably immediately, it'll trigger an incident response. And these learnings will ultimately be fed back to the continuous monitoring process of the SOC, meaning the Security Operations Center. And they're going to be notified, and there's going to be a whole team of people that are going to be looking out for it. So the dwell time of attackers is what needs to be minimized. Free pass is one of the things that's a byproduct of undetected activity, and then they get to snoop around within their environment. And the longer that they're around, the more opportunities they have to further learn about what's going on inside your environment. So with a deep understanding of that, the attacker may execute more sophisticated ways of persisting within your environment, causing bigger damage to your assets or the information, and maybe even stealing data. So the primary goal here is to minimize their dwell time, meaning the amount of time that they're actually in your systems. And security is the business of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is the CIA triad, of your organization's assets, and minimizing dwell time minimizes the damage of a threat actor that they could possibly cause or they may have already caused. And then this piece right here, this little strand of hair that they're taking from them, is essentially the evidence, I would assume. So you develop an additional detection method. You want to be able to use all the findings as well to the continuous monitoring. And because it's a continuous process, we don't want to hunt for the same threats over and over. Instead, when we've profiled the threats that we previously were undetectable by our current methods, the effort should immediately be poured into translating them into detection mechanisms, so that in the future you just kind of detect them in advance instead of them actually getting into your system. And then same thing, similar threats will be immediately detected and acted upon. And that is the overall process of this, right? So you take your, let's go from the very, very top, right? So first and foremost, you want to take the proactive approach to this thing. You want to see what all the different types of attackers are and what they could do inside of your environment. If there's anything pre-existing that you could have found, you want to add that to your arsenal or your portfolio of various IOCs and anything else that you could potentially provide to your SOC so that they can keep an eye out for it. And once that happens, they can detect these attackers sooner, and as a byproduct, lower their dwell time so that they're not in your systems as long. And that is where this piece comes in. You give them all of these various residues. They're residues. This sample of hair is meant to resemble the residue that an attack might leave behind. And then you have that feed your detection method so that you can detect those things faster and feed your sample quota, right? Your swipe file, so to speak, so that you can just refer to it and feed it to everybody in your security team so that they can notice them faster as well. So what is the primary goal of threat hunting? Okay, so primary in this case doesn't mean the very first thing on the list. It's actually further down on the page, and it is to minimize the threat actor's dwell time. So let me see if it's this whole piece right here. That might be the whole thing. So let's see. Let's go back down here and try to put that over here. There we go. Minimize the threat actor's dwell time is the primary goal. Feedback is important to keep the organization secure. Upon profiling threats through the threat hunting efforts, what should these profiles be translated to? Detection mechanisms would be the answer to this. And that's it. Just like that, we are officially wrapped with our introduction to threat hunting, and hopefully this was useful for you. If you got any value out of this video, or if you've gotten any value out of our channel, really, I would like to encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. We talk about a lot of different topics on this channel, and I think you will get a lot of value out of it. And I do respond to all the comments that come in. And if it is a good comment that has a good question, I'll even create a video as a response to your comments. For example, the Python algorithms video that we recently made, or the Linux system administrator video that became a very popular video in a short period of time. So if you have good questions, I will create a video in response to your questions. So make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And of course, make sure that you check out the Hackaholics Anonymous membership community. It is meant to be the premier YouTube community for security professionals and hackers, and I pour a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and there's a lot of great perks that are given away, like Python automations, like instant chats with me on Discord, member-only content, downloads, a lot of great stuff, and I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. So definitely make sure to check that out if you haven't done so already. This is your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I will see you in the next video. All right, later.